Liam Carter sat on the edge of their king-sized bed, the mattress barely yielding under his weight. He was tying the laces of a pair of simple, well-worn leather shoes, the kind that spoke of comfort and utility rather than status. Across the room, in the walk-in closet that was her personal kingdom, his wife, Amelia, was a whirlwind of silk and judgment. The air was thick with the scent of her expensive perfume, and the even more expensive tension she radiated. She emerged, holding a steel-gray dress against her body, her expression a careful mixture of frustration and pity. It was a look he had come to know intimately. "I just don't think you're ready, Liam," she said, the words floating out on a sigh, as if the very thought of his existence was an exhausting burden. Her eyes scanned his simple khaki trousers and his plain navy blue button-down shirt. "This isn't like your usual client meetings. These are my friends. It's different." He finished tying his laces and looked up at her. His face was calm, his eyes holding hers without challenge, yet without submission either. He was a man who understood the power of stillness. "Different how, Amelia?" "They're significant people." She struggled, as if trying to find a word that wouldn't sound as crass as rich or as arrogant as important. "Marcus is about to close a 9-figure merger. Chloe is the lead curator for the Vance Gallery. They operate in a world of nuance and connections. It's not about spreadsheets and architectural drafts." Liam felt the familiar, dull throb of the insult. He was an independent architectural consultant, a profession she described to her friends with a faint, apologetic smile. "He designs beautiful spaces," she would say, her tone implying he was more of a craftsman than a businessman, a quaint hobbyist in a world of titans. She had no idea about the true nature of his work, the scale of his clients, or the name he used in circles she could only dream of entering. He had kept that part of his life partitioned away, a deliberate test of the foundation upon which their 5-year marriage was built, a foundation that, day by day, felt more and more like sand. He stood up, tucking his shirt in neatly. "I know how to have a conversation, Amelia. I promise not to talk about load-bearing walls or zoning permits." Her laughter was sharp, a sound with no real humor in it. "It's not that, Liam. It's the presence, the confidence. You're quiet, you sit and you watch, and you doodle in that little black book of yours. They'll think you're odd. They'll think I've settled." The last 2 words were spoken softly, almost to herself, but they landed in the space between them with the force of a physical blow. He chose not to acknowledge it directly. Instead, he walked over to the small mahogany valet stand where his wallet, keys, and phone were placed. Beside them was a simple, unadorned moleskin notebook and a fountain pen. It was his constant companion. To Amelia, it was a symbol of his detachment, his failure to be present. To Liam, it was the vault. Within its pages were the skeletons of corporate strategies, the blueprints of hostile takeovers, and the quiet observations that had saved fortunes and built empires for the very few who could afford his time. His real work wasn't in architecture. It was in structure, the structure of power, of finance, of human ambition. He operated under a pseudonym, a name whispered with reverence in boardrooms from Tokyo to New York, Ethelred. But here, in his own home, he was just Liam, quiet, simple Liam, who wasn't ready. He picked up the notebook, its worn leather cover smoothed beneath his thumb. "I'll be on my best behavior," he said, his voice even. "I won't embarrass you." Amelia sighed again, the sound of a martyr facing her trial. "Just try to engage, okay? Ask Marcus about his deal. Tell Chloe her latest exhibition was groundbreaking. Just play the part, Liam, for me." He slid the notebook into the inner pocket of his jacket. It settled against his chest, a familiar weight, a secret anchor. He looked at his wife, truly looked at her. The woman he had fallen in love with, the one who had once celebrated his quiet nature, was now trying to sand it down, to reshape him into an accessory that matched her new, glossy life. He felt a profound sense of sadness, but beneath it, something else was beginning to crystallize. A quiet resolve. He had thought this test of his was about love and character. He was beginning to realize it was about survival. He was watching his marriage be evaluated on a balance sheet of social capital, and he was being marked down as a liability. What Amelia didn't know, what she couldn't possibly comprehend, was that tonight, at this dinner with her significant friends, an audit was coming. Not for him, but for her. And he, the quiet man in the simple shoes, was the one who would be holding the ledger. The reversal of their fortunes was already in motion, a silent, powerful current pulling them toward a reckoning she would never see coming. Before the story of that night unfolds, a night that would shatter illusions like fine crystal dropped on marble, take a moment. If you've ever felt underestimated, if you've ever had to bite your tongue while someone judged you on appearances, hit that like button. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from, and subscribe for more stories where the quiet ones finally have their say. Now, let us return to that evening, to a small exclusive restaurant where the appetizers were about to be served with a large side of humiliation. The restaurant was called Aperture, a name that suggested focus and clarity, two things utterly absent from the conversation at their table. It was a temple of minimalist design, concrete floors, stark lighting, and a hushed reverence that was regularly broken by the braying laughter of Marcus Thorne. He was a man whose expensive suit seemed to be wearing him, rather than the other way around. His face was perpetually flushed with wine and self-satisfaction. Across from him, Chloe Vance, the gallery curator, picked at a single scallop on her plate as if its existence was a personal affront. Her thin lips were set in a permanent sneer of sophisticated boredom. Liam sat beside Amelia, a silent observer, just as she had predicted. He had ordered a simple steak, a choice that had earned a subtle, almost imperceptible eye roll from Marcus. Liam had noted it, logged it away in the mental annex of the notebook resting in his jacket pocket. The key to the sterling deal, Marcus was saying, leaning forward conspiratorially, though his voice was loud enough for the neighboring tables to hear, is access. The man himself is a ghost, but his right hand, a fellow named Davies, he's the gatekeeper. I've been courting him for 6 months. Dinners, golf, the usual dance. Amelia leaned in, her eyes wide with admiration. That's incredible, Marcus. To even be in the orbit of someone like Harrison Sterling, it's another level. Harrison Sterling. The name hung in the air. To them, he was a legend, a mythical figure of global finance. To Liam, he was Harry, a client of 8 years, a friend, and the man who had once called him at 3 a.m, voice trembling with panic, because a rival firm was attempting a hostile takeover. It was a problem Ethelred had solved in 72 hours with a 3-pronged strategy sketched out on a cocktail napkin. It's all about who you know, Chloe added, dabbing her lips with a napkin. For instance, we're trying to get the Sterling Foundation to fund our new wing. It would be a legacy project, but getting a proposal in front of him is like trying to nail jelly to a wall. Liam took a slow sip of his water. He remembered the initial proposal for that wing. Sterling had sent it to him for review. Liam's note, scrawled in the margin, had been simple, ambitious but unfocused, lacks a coherent community narrative. Hold. The funding had been quietly tabled. Well, if anyone can do it, you can, Chloe, Amelia said, her voice a balm of sycophantic support. She then turned to Liam, a bright, artificial smile plastered on her face. Liam is an architect, you know, she announced, as if presenting a peculiar party trick. Marcus turned his gaze to Liam, a flicker of condescending interest in his eyes. Oh, really? Residential? Commercial? A bit of both, Liam answered calmly. I consult on structural and spatial efficiency. Ah, Marcus said, the sound dripping with dismissal. He turned back to the group. So, you're the guy who tells people where to put the walls, he laughed, a short barking sound. Chloe smirked into her wine glass. Amelia's hand landed on Liam's thigh, a gesture that might have looked supportive to an outsider, but he felt the slight, sharp pressure of her nails, a warning. Play along. Don't make this weird. He didn't. He simply gave a small, non-committal nod. Something like that. The conversation moved on, back to million-dollar deals and the art of social climbing. Liam became invisible again, a piece of furniture at the table. He ate his steak, which was perfectly cooked. He listened. He observed the intricate dance of ego and insecurity before him. Marcus, desperate to prove his worth. Chloe, hiding her professional anxieties behind a veneer of artistic snobbery. And Amelia. Amelia was the most fascinating of all. She was a chameleon, effortlessly mirroring their values, their language, their casual cruelty. She was so desperate to belong to their world that she had forgotten she already belonged to his. At one point, while Marcus was pontificating about risk management, Liam quietly took out his moleskin notebook and his pen. He wasn't doodling, he was making a note. It was a simple diagram, a triangle with Marcus, Chloe, and a holding company called Northlight Acquisitions at the points. He then drew a line from Northlight to a small circled A in the corner of the page, A for Ethelred, A for Anonymous, A for Asset. Amelia saw the movement from the corner of her eye. Her smile tightened. "Liam, darling, put that away," she whispered, her voice light but edged with steel. "You're being rude." He looked at her, then at the notebook. He didn't close it immediately. He held her gaze for a single long second. In that second, he allowed a fraction of his disappointment to show. He wanted to see if she would recognize it, if she would see the man she was dismissing. She didn't. She just saw the quiet, odd husband who was embarrassing her. Her eyes darted nervously toward her friends, praying they hadn't noticed his little transgression. Slowly, deliberately, Liam closed the notebook. He slid it back into his pocket. The weight against his chest felt heavier now. It was the weight of a decision being made. The test was no longer passive. The conditions had been met. The observation phase was over. He had given her every chance to stand with him, to defend him, to see him. She had failed on all counts. From this moment on, every action he took would be a consequence of that failure. The evening was far from over, but for Liam, the marriage as he had known it had just ended. The structure was compromised, and when a structure is compromised, it must be either reinforced or demolished. The ride home was a study in frigid silence. Amelia stared out the passenger window, the glittering city lights reflecting in her eyes but offering none of their warmth. Liam drove with a steady, unhurried hand, the car a hermetically sealed capsule of resentment. When they finally pulled into the garage of their modern, minimalist house, a house Liam had designed, a fact she rarely mentioned anymore, she unbuckled her seatbelt before the engine was even off. "I have never been so mortified in my entire life," she said, her voice low and trembling with a rage she had clearly been bottling all evening. Liam turned off the ignition. The ensuing silence was absolute, broken only by the soft ticking of the cooling engine. "Mortified by what, specifically?" he asked. His tone was not argumentative. It was inquisitive, like a scientist examining a specimen. "By what?" She turned to him, her face a mask of disbelief. "By you, Liam. By your silence. By you pulling out that ridiculous little book as if you were a student in a lecture hall. Marcus asked me on the way to the valet if you were all there. Do you have any idea how that feels?" "I know exactly how it feels," he replied, his voice still unnervingly calm. "He's been implying it all night, and you've been agreeing with him." "I have not," she shot back, her defensiveness a shield. "I was trying to manage the situation. I was trying to cover for you. You just sat there like a stone while they were talking about their lives, their careers. You made no effort." "My effort," Liam said, turning slightly in his seat to face her, "has been in building a life with you. A life I thought was based on mutual respect. It seems I miscalculated the materials." The architectural metaphor was lost on her. "Oh, here we go. This is what you do. You retreat into these cryptic, philosophical statements because you can't handle a simple social situation. It was a dinner, Liam. All you had to do was pretend to be interested. It's a game. You have to play it. It's a game you are losing, Amelia," he said. And for the first time, a sliver of the immense cold authority he wielded as Ethelred bled into his voice. It was so out of character that it stopped her short. She stared at him, momentarily confused. What is that supposed to mean? He didn't answer directly. He simply got out of the car, walked around to the trunk, and retrieved his briefcase. She followed him into the house, her heels clicking angrily on the polished concrete floors. "Don't you walk away from me," she called after him as he headed toward his home office. "We are not done talking about this." He stopped at the threshold of the office, a space she rarely entered, calling it his bunker. It was spare, clean, and organized with an almost monastic precision. He turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "You're right," he said. "We're not. You're upset because you believe your friend's perception of me reflects on you. You're worried they think you settled for a man who is beneath them. It's not about being beneath them. It's about being compatible. It's about fitting in. And I don't fit," he stated. It wasn't a question. "No, you don't," she finally burst out, the truth of her feelings finally erupting. "You don't even try. You seem proud of it, proud of your simple clothes and your quiet little job and your utter lack of ambition." The word ambition hung in the air between them, acrid and absurd. Liam thought of the file on his desk, a proposal for restructuring the entire energy grid of a small European nation. He thought of the $500 million charitable foundation he had established anonymously 3 years prior. He thought of the quiet power he wielded, a power so vast it would terrify her if she knew. A lack of ambition. The irony was so profound it was almost comical. He gave a slow, deliberate nod. "I see. Thank you for your honesty." His lack of anger seemed to infuriate her even more. "That's it? Thank you for your honesty? Are you even human, Liam? Do you feel anything? Or do you just observe and take notes?" He walked into his office and closed the door, not slamming it, but shutting it with a soft, final click. The sound was more definitive than any shout could have been. On the other side, Amelia stood for a moment, stunned into silence. She had wanted a fight, a passionate argument. Instead, she had been met with a quiet clinical assessment. She felt dismissed, analyzed, and, for the first time, a faint, unfamiliar flicker of fear. It was the feeling of pushing against a door, expecting it to swing open, only to find it was a wall of solid granite. Inside his office, Liam sat down at his large oak desk. He didn't turn on the main lights, allowing the soft glow from his monitor to illuminate the room. He didn't open the file on the European energy grid. Instead, he pulled out his phone and made a call. It was answered on the first ring. "Ethelred," a crisp, familiar voice said. There was no preamble. "Davies?" Liam replied, his voice shifting subtly, shedding the persona of Liam Carter and assuming the mantle of his work. "I need you to do something for me. I'm sending you 2 names, Marcus Thorne and Chloe Vance. I want a full workup on their current professional endeavors, specifically any deals or funding dependent on external venture capital or philanthropic grants. I want to know every point of leverage. I need it by morning." "Consider it done," Davies said. "Is there a problem?" Liam looked at the closed door of his office. He could hear Amelia pacing in the hallway. "No, Davies," he said, his voice quiet but absolute. "Not a problem. A correction." He hung up the phone and opened his laptop. He began to type, his fingers moving with practiced speed. He was drafting an email not to Davies, but to Harrison Sterling himself. The subject line was simple: the gala. The annual Sterling Foundation Charity Gala was in 2 weeks. It was the absolute pinnacle of the social and financial calendar, an event Marcus and Chloe would kill to be at, and one Amelia had been talking about for months. She had already lamented that they had no chance of getting an invitation. The email was short. "Harry, I'll be attending the gala this year, and I'll be bringing my wife. Please arrange for our credentials. Ethelred." He hit send. Within 60 seconds, a reply appeared. "Of course. She is in for quite a surprise. Looking forward to it. H." Liam closed the laptop. He leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking softly in the quiet room. He had just set in motion a series of events that would unravel the world Amelia held so dear. It was not an act of anger. It was an act of precision, a structural test. He was about to apply a controlled, overwhelming force to the fragile edifice of her values, just to see what, if anything, would remain standing. The humiliation he had felt at dinner was a catalyst. But this was a calculated response. He was a man who designed structures, and he knew, better than anyone, that sometimes the only way to fix a faulty foundation is to bring the whole house down. The 2 weeks leading up to the gala were a masterclass in psychological warfare. Though only one of them knew a war was being waged, Liam maintained his quiet, observant demeanor, but a new layer of deliberate distance had formed. He was polite, considerate, but remote. He was an architect studying his own home from a blueprint, no longer an inhabitant. Amelia, in turn, swung between simmering resentment and confused attempts at reconciliation. She would make his favorite dinner one night, then critique the way he read the newspaper the next morning. She was probing his defenses, trying to find the husband she thought she knew, but she kept meeting the cool, placid surface of a stranger. A week before the event, a large, impossibly elegant vellum envelope arrived by special courier. Amelia, who had been working from home, signed for it, her brow furrowed in confusion. The return address simply read, "The Sterling Foundation." Her heart began to beat a little faster. With trembling fingers, she opened the thick, creamy cardstock. "The Sterling Foundation is pleased to invite Mr. and Mrs. Liam Carter to the annual charity gala." She read it 3 times. It didn't make sense. She hadn't mentioned the gala to Liam since their fight. Her own extensive and often humiliating attempts to get her boss on the invite list had failed spectacularly. How had this happened? She found Liam in his office, sketching on a large sheet of drafting paper. "This came," she said, holding out the invitation as if it were a holy relic. "How?" Liam looked up from his work, his expression neutral. He glanced at the card. "Ah, good. That's come through, then." "What do you mean, come through?" she demanded. "Liam, this is the Sterling Gala. People sacrifice their firstborn for these tickets. How did we get this?" "One of my clients has a connection to the foundation," he said, the statement being technically true, if a monumental understatement. "I mentioned you were interested in their work. He offered to arrange it." Amelia stared at him, her mind racing. A client? Liam's clients were mid-level developers and small business owners, weren't they? Who among them could possibly have this kind of pull? The invitation felt like a contradiction, a piece of data that didn't fit her carefully constructed image of her husband. But the sheer dazzling prestige of the invitation quickly overshadowed her suspicion. The how became less important than the wow. "A client," she repeated, a slow, disbelieving smile spreading across her face. "Liam, this is incredible. Marcus will lose his mind. Chloe will be green with envy." And there it was, the true value of the invitation, measured in the currency of her friend's jealousy. The days that followed were a blur of frenzied preparation for Amelia. She bought a new dress, a shimmering backless gown of deep emerald green that cost more than their first car. She booked appointments for her hair, her nails, her everything. She was a general preparing for her ultimate social triumph. Her attitude toward Liam softened, replaced by a kind of proprietary pride. He was no longer just her embarrassing husband. He was her mysterious ticket to the inner sanctum. The night of the gala arrived. The air in their home was charged with anticipation. Liam stood in front of the full-length mirror, adjusting the cuffs of a bespoke tuxedo. It was a garment he had owned for years, tailored to perfection by a Savile Row artisan who knew him only as Mr. Ethelred. The cut was timeless, the dark charcoal wool absorbing the light. It was a suit designed not to be noticed, but to convey an effortless, unassailable authority. Amelia entered the room, a vision in her emerald dress. She looked stunning, and Liam felt a pang of the love he once had for her, a phantom limb of an emotion. She stopped and stared at him. She had never seen him in a tuxedo before. He didn't look like simple Liam anymore. He looked formidable. "Wow," she breathed. "You clean up well." He gave a small smile. "You look beautiful, Amelia." Her mood, however, was too fraught with anxiety to remain pleasant for long. As they got into the hired town car, the old dynamic returned. She began her final, patronizing pep talk. "Okay, Liam," she started, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Listen to me. This is the big leagues. Do not, under any circumstances, wander off by yourself. Stay by my side. Smile. Nod. If someone asks you what you do, just say you're in strategic consulting. It's vague, it sounds important, and it's better than architecture." He said nothing, simply watched the city lights streak past the window. The car was a cocoon of leather and silence. "Don't take out your notebook," she continued, her voice growing more intense. "Don't talk about anything controversial. Politics, religion, modern art. Just stick to safe topics. The market, travel, wine. Can you do that for me? Can you just be normal for one night?" He turned his head slowly and looked at her. His calm was absolute, And who should I avoid, Amelia? You mentioned last time that there were people I should stay away from. The question was a quiet echo of her insults, a precisely placed scalpel. She missed the nuance entirely. Oh God, yes, the main thing is, do not try to approach Harrison Sterling. He'll be there, but he's surrounded by a wall of security and handlers. People who try to get to him look desperate. They look small. So if you see him, you look the other way. We are not those people. We are there because we belong. We have to project that. Do you understand? I understand perfectly, Liam said. He reached into the inner pocket of his tuxedo jacket, and his fingers brushed against the familiar leather of his moleskin. He didn't take it out. He just rested his hand there, over his heart, a silent promise, a final moment of quiet before the storm. The car pulled up to a magnificent historical building, its facade bathed in golden light. Liveried valets moved with practiced efficiency. The air hummed with the energy of immense wealth and power. Amelia took a deep, shaky breath, her game face on. Ready? She asked, her voice a tight whisper. I've been ready for a long time, Liam replied, his voice so low she almost didn't hear it. He stepped out of the car, and the world he had kept hidden for so long was about to collide with the world she so desperately wanted to inhabit. He was no longer just an architect, he was an architect of consequence, and the demolition was about to begin. The grand hall of the Sterling Foundation Gala was an exercise in breathtaking opulence. A ceiling painted with celestial frescoes soared 3 stories high, from which hung chandeliers that dripped diamonds of light onto the polished marble floor. The air was a symphony of string music, hushed conversation, and the clinking of champagne flutes. The most powerful people in the city, and indeed the world, moved through the space like constellations. Their gravity felt long before they were seen. Amelia was in her element, or rather, the element she aspired to. Her hand was a vice on Liam's arm, guiding him through the glittering crowd. She pointed out figures in hushed, reverent tones. That's Jian Li, the tech billionaire. The woman she's talking to runs the largest media conglomerate in Europe. Oh my God, Liam, don't stare. But that's Senator Morrison. Liam moved with her, a silent, watchful presence. He saw it all, but through a different lens. He saw the desperate hunger in the eyes of the climbers, the profound boredom in the eyes of the established, and the intricate web of dependencies and rivalries that connected them all. It was a human ecosystem he knew better than anyone. They soon found Marcus and Chloe by the champagne fountain. They had managed to secure invitations through Marcus's firm, a fact he announced with preening pride. Their surprise at seeing Liam and Amelia was immediate and poorly concealed. Amelia, Carter, Marcus boomed, his eyes widening as he took in the scene. I'll be damned. How did you two swing this? The question was directed at Amelia, as if Liam were merely an accessory she had brought along. A client of Liam's is a benefactor of the foundation, Amelia said, delivering the line she had rehearsed. It sounded more plausible now, seeing Liam in his perfectly tailored tuxedo. He looked less like a man who designed walls and more like a man who owned the building. Chloe's eyes narrowed, scanning Liam from head to toe. Strategic consulting, Amelia told us? You've been holding out on us, Liam. There was a teasing lilt to her voice, but an undercurrent of suspicion. The world they inhabited did not like anomalies. Liam was an anomaly. I prefer to keep my work private, Liam said, his voice even and calm. The conversation continued, a rehash of the dinner party, but on a grander scale. Marcus boasted about his proximity to the Sterling inner circle. Davies and I are meant to be connecting later, he said, puffing out his chest. We're finalizing the terms of a new venture fund. Harrison Sterling himself is taking a personal interest. Liam knew for a fact this was a lie. Davies had mentioned Marcus's incessant emails in passing, referring to him as that pest from Thorn Capital. Sterling wouldn't know Marcus Thorn if he tripped over him. It was then that the atmosphere in the room subtly shifted. A path began to clear through the crowd, people parting with a deference that was instinctual. A man was walking through the hall, flanked by 2 unobtrusive but clearly capable security guards. He was in his late 60s, with a mane of silver hair and eyes that held the calm, piercing intensity of a bird of prey. He wore a simple, dark suit, yet he was the undeniable center of gravity in the room. Harrison Sterling had arrived. Amelia's grip on Liam's arm tightened until it was painful. Don't look, she hissed. Turn away. Talk to me. Pretend he's not there. Marcus and Chloe fell silent, their eyes tracking Sterling's movement with a mixture of awe and naked ambition. Marcus subtly adjusted his tie, as if hoping to be noticed. Liam did not turn away. He stood perfectly still. He watched as Sterling moved through the room, politely nodding at a few select people, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. Then Sterling's eyes met Liam's. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then a slow smile of genuine warmth and recognition spread across Harrison Sterling's face. He changed his trajectory. He ignored the senator, the tech billionaire, and the hopeful socialites. He walked directly toward the small group by the champagne fountain. Marcus visibly swelled with importance, convinced Sterling was finally acknowledging him. He took a half step forward, a sycophantic smile plastered on his face. "Mr. Sterling," he began, extending a hand. "Marcus Thorne. We haven't been formally introduced, but I'm a great admirer of—" Harrison Sterling walked past Marcus's outstretched hand as if it didn't exist. He walked past Chloe. He walked past Amelia, whose face was frozen in a mask of horror and confusion. He stopped directly in front of Liam. The two men looked at each other for a moment, the noisy grandeur of the gala fading into a bubble of silence around them. "You came," Sterling said, his voice a low rumble of pure pleasure. "I wasn't sure you would. You hate these things." "You said it was important," Liam replied, a small, genuine smile touching his own lips for the first time that night. And then, in front of the entire glittering assembly, in front of his stunned wife and her dumbfounded friends, Harrison Sterling, the ghost of global finance, the man who was a living myth, pulled Liam into a firm, heartfelt embrace. He clapped him on the back. "It's damn good to see you, Ethelred," he said, his voice resonating with warmth and deep respect. The name dropped into the silence like a stone into a perfectly still pond. Ethelred, a name that meant nothing to Amelia, to Chloe, to the onlookers. But to Marcus, who had spent the last year desperately trying to get into the world where that name was spoken, it was the sound of a god being invoked. Marcus's jaw went slack. The color drained from his face. He stared at Liam, at the simple, quiet man his wife had brought to dinner, as if seeing him for the first time. The man he had mocked, the man he had dismissed. Amelia's hand slipped from Liam's arm. She looked from her husband, now being embraced by the most powerful man in the room, to Marcus's face, which was a canvas of pure, unadulterated shock. The world, her carefully constructed, status-obsessed world, was tilting on its axis. The man she had told to be seen and not heard was now the center of everyone's attention. The revelation had begun, and it was more stunning and more public than she could have ever imagined. The name Ethelred echoed in the cavernous space of Marcus Thorne's mind. It wasn't just a name. It was a legend, a phantom, a strategic genius so exclusive and so fiercely private that his existence was debated in the highest echelons of power. Some said he was a syndicate of ex-intelligence analysts. Others believed he was an AI construct, AI. But the prevailing theory was that he was a single brilliant mind, the ultimate kingmaker and crisis solver, whose advice could pivot the fortunes of nations and corporations. To be a client of Ethelred was the ultimate status symbol, a secret kept more closely than any bank account number, and Harrison Sterling had just called Liam Carter, quiet, unassuming architect Liam, by that name. The embrace ended, but Sterling kept a hand on Liam's shoulder, a gesture of familiar camaraderie and possession. "Forgive me," Sterling said to Liam, though his eyes swept over the stunned faces of Amelia, Marcus, and Chloe. "I know you value your privacy, but I couldn't resist. It's been too long." He then turned his piercing gaze fully onto Marcus, who seemed to shrink inside his expensive suit. "You're Marcus Thorne," Sterling stated, his voice flat, devoid of the warmth he had shown Liam. "The man who has been flooding my associate's inbox." Marcus opened and closed his mouth like a fish. Mr. Sterling, I was just the venture fund," he stammered, his carefully constructed facade of confidence shattering into a million pieces. "The fund you were proposing," Sterling continued, his voice dropping into a dangerously soft register, "was predicated on a partnership with Northlight Acquisitions, was it not?" Marcus nodded dumbly, his eyes darting to Liam, then back to Sterling, the terrible gears of realization beginning to grind in his head. Sterling gestured with his free hand toward Liam. Ethelred here, or Liam as you know him, happens to be the sole anonymous principal of Northlight Acquisitions. He founded it years ago as a private vehicle for his more creative investments. He reviewed your proposal personally. He found it, and I believe I'm quoting him correctly, unimaginative and poorly leveraged. The words landed like hammer blows. Every boast Marcus had ever made, every ounce of condescension he had shown Liam, was now collapsing in on him. The man he mocked as a wall placer was the very person who held his entire professional future in the palm of his hand. Sterling then turned his attention to Chloe, whose face had gone pale. And you, Miss Vance, the curator, you were seeking a grant for the new wing of your gallery. Chloe swallowed hard, unable to speak. Liam reviewed that proposal as well, Sterling said, his tone one of finality. His recommendation was that the Foundation's funds would be better directed toward programs with more robust community outreach. My board agreed. The funding was denied last week. I trust you'll be receiving the official letter shortly. The public humiliation was absolute, delivered with the surgical precision of a master. It was not loud or angry. It was a quiet, devastating execution. Finally, Sterling's gaze fell upon Amelia. It was a look of cool assessment, tinged with something that looked like disappointment. He looked at her, then at Liam, and a flicker of understanding passed between the two men. Amelia, Liam said, his voice cutting through the thick, horrified silence. It was the first time he had spoken. His voice was not the quiet, deferential tone she was used to. It was the voice of Ethelred, calm, measured, and radiating an authority that dwarfed everyone in the room, including Sterling himself. Mr. Sterling and I have some business to discuss. Perhaps you and your friends can mingle. The word mingle was delivered without sarcasm, but it hung in the air, a perfect brutal echo of all the instructions she had given him. He was dismissing her. He was sending her away, just as she had planned to do to him. She stared at her husband, this man who was a complete and utter stranger to her. The simple, ambitionless man she had tolerated, pitied, and tried to mold was gone. In his place stood a Titan, a man who moved in a world so far beyond her comprehension that she felt like a child looking at the night sky. The emerald dress felt like a cheap costume. Her social aspirations felt like a pathetic joke. Without another word, Sterling guided Liam away from the group, his hand still on his shoulder, leaving Amelia, Marcus, and Chloe standing in the wreckage. They were frozen, a tableau of social death in the middle of the grandest party of the year. Everyone was watching them. They could feel the whispers starting, the story of their spectacular downfall already beginning to spread through the room like wildfire. Amelia's legs felt weak. She looked at Marcus, whose face was ashen. She looked at Chloe, who looked like she was about to be physically ill. These people, whose approval she had craved, whose world she had longed for, were revealed to be nothing but small, posturing children in the face of true power, a power that had been sleeping beside her every night, a power she had mocked, belittled, and called unready. The irony was a physical pain, a sharp, twisting knife in her gut. She had been so worried about him embarrassing her. She had never once considered that she was the one embarrassing him. The town car on the way home was a vacuum. The silence was no longer frigid. It was a dead, airless void. Amelia sat as far from Liam as she could, her shimmering dress a mockery of the evening's glamour. She kept stealing glances at him, at his profile illuminated by the passing streetlights. He was the same man, the same physical form, but everything about him was different. His stillness no longer seemed passive. It seemed potent. His silence was not empty. It was full of thoughts she could not begin to imagine. He hadn't said a word to her since he had dismissed her at the gala. After his meeting with Sterling, he had found her by the entrance, her friends having long since vanished into the night, and had simply said, "It's time to go." When the car pulled into their garage, she felt a surge of panic. The garage, the house, the life she knew, it all felt like a stage set that was about to be struck. She followed him inside, her earlier anger replaced by a deep, gnawing dread. He didn't go to his office. He walked into the center of the vast, open-plan living room he had designed and stood there, looking around as if reevaluating his own work. "Who are you?" Amelia finally whispered, the question raw and desperate. Liam turned to face her. His expression was not angry, not triumphant. It was weary. It was the face of a man whose patience had finally irrevocably run out. "I am your husband," he said simply. "I am the man who has loved you for 5 years. I am the man who has been waiting for you to see him. Ethelred." She breathed the name. "Harrison Sterling called you Ethelred." Marcus looked like he'd seen a ghost. "Ethelred is a name I use for my work," he explained, his voice even. "My real work, the consulting you find so quaint, is a cover for it. It allows me a quiet life. It allows me privacy. I solve problems for people like Harrison Sterling. Complicated, expensive problems." Her mind reeled, trying to process the scale of it. "The money, we live well, but the money is not the point," he cut her off, his voice sharp for the first time. "It never has been. The money is a byproduct. The point is the work. The point is the trust my clients place in me. A trust I thought I also had at home." He took a step toward her. She flinched. "I have spent 5 years," he said, his voice low and intense, "building this life with you, waiting for the moment you would choose me over them, over the idea of them, over the validation you think their world provides." "I didn't know," she pleaded, tears beginning to well in her eyes. "How could I know? You never told me." "Tell you what, Amelia," for he asked, his question a quiet balm. "That I was wealthy? That I was powerful? Should our marriage have come with a financial statement? I didn't want a wife who was impressed by my bank account. I wanted a partner who respected my character. I wanted you to defend Liam Carter, the quiet architect, not fawn over Ethelred, the corporate phantom." He began to walk slowly around the room, his hands clasped behind his back. He was no longer the defendant. He was the prosecutor, and this room was his courtroom. "I gave you every opportunity," he continued, his voice a calm, devastating indictment. "Every time you belittled my work, every time you apologized for me to your friends, every time you told me I wasn't ready or good enough, you were failing a test you didn't even know you were taking." "A test?" she cried, a note of hysteria entering her voice. "You were testing me?" "Life is a test," he replied. "Marriage is a test. It tests for loyalty, for respect, for integrity. You were so focused on grading me, you never stopped to consider your own score." He stopped in front of her. He looked her directly in the eye. "Tonight, in the car, you gave me a list of instructions. How to act, who to talk to, who to avoid. You told me not to embarrass you. You told me to play a part." He paused, letting the weight of his next words settle. "The part you wanted me to play was someone I'm not. The irony is that is the exact part you have been playing for years, pretending to be one of them, pretending their values are your own, pretending to be happy in a world that requires you to be ashamed of your own husband." The truth of his words was undeniable. She collapsed onto the sofa, her sobs finally breaking free. It was not a plea for forgiveness. It was the sound of her entire identity shattering. The woman she had tried to be was a fraud, and the man she had tried to hide was a king. Liam watched her cry, his expression unchanged. There was no pity in his eyes, but no satisfaction either. There was only clarity. The storm had broken. Now came the long, painful process of surveying the damage. He had revealed his power, but in doing so, he had also revealed the deep structural flaw in the foundation of their life together, and he still didn't know if anything could be built upon it ever again. The days following the gala were thick with a silence that was heavier than any argument. Liam moved into the guest suite on the other side of the house, creating a physical distance that mirrored the emotional chasm between them. He went about his days with a quiet, unnerving routine, making calls, taking meetings, and managing affairs of a scale Amelia still couldn't fathom. He was Ethelred full-time now, the persona of the simple architect shed like a skin. Amelia, meanwhile, drifted through the large, empty rooms of the house like a ghost. Her friends had vanished. Marcus was in professional freefall, his firm losing its primary investor, Northlight Acquisitions, and his reputation shredded. He hadn't returned her calls. Chloe had sent a single venomous text message blaming Amelia for the loss of her gallery's funding, before blocking her number. The social circle she had sacrificed her integrity for had evaporated the moment her proximity became a liability. She was alone with the consequences of her choices, and with the stranger who was her husband. About a week after the gala, she found him in the library, a room he had designed with floor-to-ceiling shelves, most of which were filled. She had always assumed the books were for show. Now she realized he had probably read them all. He was sitting in a leather armchair, his infamous moleskin notebook open on his lap. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice small. He looked up, his gaze steady. He closed the notebook and set it aside. "I'm listening." She had rehearsed 100 speeches in her head. Apologies, justifications, pleas. But looking at him now, at the immense quiet power he projected, they all felt hollow and inadequate. So she settled on the truth. "I was a fool," she said, her voice cracking. "I was shallow, and I was cruel, and I am so sorry." Liam nodded slowly. "You were," he agreed. The simple, unvarnished confirmation more cutting than any lecture. "The question is, why?" "I was insecure," she admitted, the words tasting like ash. "I grew up with nothing. I got to the city, and I saw this world of glamour and influence, and I wanted it. I wanted to be a part of it. I thought it would make me feel like I had finally arrived, like I was worth something." "And was my love not worth something?" he asked, his voice dangerously soft. "Was the life we were building not enough?" "It should have been," she wept, the tears flowing freely now. "It was more than enough. I was just too blind and too stupid to see it. I was so busy looking up at them, I never looked beside me. I took you for granted. I tried to diminish you, because I was terrified that if you ever truly shone, you would leave me behind." The confession hung in the air, a raw and painful piece of self-awareness. Liam was silent for a long time, considering her words. He stood up and walked over to the window, looking out at the meticulously designed garden. "You know," he began, his back still to her, "the first time I met Harrison Sterling, it was in a dusty, forgotten boardroom of a company that was days from bankruptcy. He was ruined. His partners had betrayed him. He had nothing. I wasn't hired by him. I was hired by the board to oversee the liquidation, to dismantle his life's work." He turned around. "I spent 3 days analyzing the company. On the 4th day, I presented my findings to the board. I told them they were wrong. I told them the company's core structure was sound, but its leadership was corrupt. I told them that if they put their faith in Harrison Sterling and followed a 7-point plan I had devised, the company wouldn't just survive, it would dominate the market within 2 years." He walked back toward her. "They thought I was insane, but Sterling, he looked at me and he saw something. He trusted me. We rebuilt that company from the ashes. That company is now the cornerstone of his empire. My entire career, my entire reputation, is built on seeing the hidden value in things others have written off." He stopped in front of her chair, looking down at her. "I saw that value in you, Amelia. I saw a brilliant, compassionate, and resilient woman beneath a layer of fear and insecurity. I bet everything on that woman. For 5 years, I have been waiting for her to emerge." He then delivered the list of grievances, not as an attack, but as a quiet, factual recitation. "On our 2nd anniversary, you told me the watch your parents had given me looked dated and bought me a new one that I never wore. On May 14th, at the gallery opening, you told me my suit looked rented. On June 3rd, at that awful dinner, you laughed when Marcus called my work a quaint little hobby. And on the night of the gala, you told me to be seen and not heard, to make myself small so that you could feel big. Each memory was a precise, painful incision. I am not listing these things to hurt you," he said, his voice softening slightly. "I am listing them so you understand. The damage is not from one night. It is a foundation that has been rotting for years. An apology is a start, but it doesn't fix the rot." Amelia looked up at him, her face streaked with tears. "Then what does? What can I do? I will do anything, Liam." He held her gaze. "You have to stop wanting their world," he said. "You have to find your own. The job you have, the PR work for luxury brands, it feeds the part of you that I can no longer live with. The obsession with image, with status, with the approval of shallow people. It has to end. You want me to quit my job? She asked, stunned. I want you to save yourself, he corrected. I want you to find out who Amelia Carter is when she isn't trying to impress anyone. I want you to find something to do that has meaning. Real meaning. Volunteer. Go back to school. Start a small business based on something you actually love. I don't care what it is, as long as it's authentic, as long as it's yours. It was not an ultimatum of divorce. It was an ultimatum of rebirth. He was not casting her out. He was showing her the door to a different, better life, but she had to be the one to walk through it. I'll be here, he said, his voice losing its hard edge, replaced by a deep, resonant sadness. In this house, but I cannot share a life with the woman you have been. I can only share one with the woman I still believe you can be. He left her then, alone in the library with the weight of his words and the immensity of the choice before her. He had laid out the terms, not of a business deal, but of a soul's redemption. The consequences for her friends had been swift and financial. The consequences for her were far more profound. She had to lose her life to find it. The 6 months that followed were a quiet, arduous journey. Amelia quit her job the very next day. Her boss, who had only valued her for her social connections that were now toxic, let her go without a second thought. The first few weeks were a disorienting freefall. Her identity had been so wrapped up in her career and her social aspirations that, without them, she felt like a complete void. She sold her designer clothes and handbags online, the process feeling like a ritualistic shedding of a false skin. She used the money to pay for a course in nonprofit management at the local university. She started volunteering at a downtown shelter for homeless youth, a world away from the champagne fountains and curated galleries she once frequented. The work was grueling, thankless, and emotionally draining. It was also the most real thing she had ever done. Liam kept his distance, but he watched. He saw the exhaustion in her eyes, but he also saw a new light beginning to dawn there. He saw her come home, not buzzing with gossip and social anxiety, but filled with a quiet, weary purpose. She would talk about the kids at the shelter, about the systemic problems they faced, about the small victories, getting one of them into a job program, finding a family willing to take in another. She wasn't trying to impress him. She was simply sharing her day. Their conversations were tentative at first, held over the kitchen island. They were like two people getting to know each other for the first time. He would tell her about his work, the real work. He explained the complex strategy behind a recent currency stabilization he had engineered for a developing country. She listened, not with the feigned interest of a social climber, but with genuine curiosity, asking intelligent questions. She was no longer intimidated by his intellect. She was fascinated by it. One evening, he came home to find her in the library, surrounded by books on urban planning and social housing policy. She was sketching in a notebook, not a moleskin, but a simple spiral-bound one. "What are you working on?" he asked, his voice gentle. She looked up, a hesitant smile on her face. "It's probably silly, but I have an idea. A proposal for a transitional housing project for the kids at the shelter, one that incorporates job training and mental health services right on site. It's more than just a roof. It's a support structure." He looked over her shoulder at her sketches. They were rough, but the ideas were sound. The spatial planning was intuitive and compassionate. He saw a glimmer of his own mind in hers, the ability to see not just a building, but a system, a structure for living. "It's not silly, Amelia," he said softly. "It's brilliant." He pulled up a chair and opened her notebook. "The land acquisition will be the hardest part," he began, his voice shifting into the familiar authoritative tone of Ethelred. But this time, it was not directed against her. It was for her. "But I know a few people in city development. Let's look at the zoning maps. We can make this happen." That night they worked together for hours, side by side, their minds in perfect sync. The chasm between them began to close. The guest suite door remained open. A year after the gala, Liam stood on a construction site in a once neglected part of the city. The framework of a new building was rising against the sky. It was the Phoenix House, a state-of-the-art facility for at-risk youth. Beside him stood Amelia, now the executive director of the Phoenix Foundation. She was dressed in practical jeans and a simple blouse, her face glowing with a confidence that had nothing to do with designer labels or social status. Harrison Sterling walked up to them, a warm smile on his face. "It's a magnificent project, Amelia," he said, his respect for her genuine and deep. "You've done something remarkable here." "I had a good consultant," she said, her eyes finding Liam's. The love in her gaze was clear, profound, and hard-earned. Liam looked at his wife, truly his partner in every sense of the word. The woman he had fallen in love with had not just reemerged. She had been forged anew in the fire of humility and purpose. He had brought down the house they had built, but together they had cleared the rubble and laid a new foundation, one of solid rock. True worth is not measured by the company you keep or the invitations you receive. It is measured by your character, your integrity, and the quiet strength you show when no one is watching. No, it is the ability to see the value in others, not for what they can do for you, but for who they are. Amelia had learned that lesson in the most public and painful way possible, but she had learned it, and in doing so, she had not only redeemed her marriage, she had redeemed herself. Theirs was no longer a story of hidden power and painful secrets, but a testament to the fact that the strongest structures are not those that can't be broken, but those that can be rebuilt better and more beautiful than before. What do you think? Is redemption like Amelia's truly possible? Or are some betrayals of trust too deep to mend? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read everyone. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more tales of justice, growth, and the quiet power of integrity. Thank you for watching.